Well, hello you wonderful fans of Diablo, and welcome to my brief update video where I just wanted to go over some of the recent Q&A with the developers and some other important news so that you guys can stay up to date with Diablo 4 developments. Well, we are just 41 days away from being able to dangerously overplay this game, and the more updates I read about, the more excited I get. Before we start, if you find this video helpful to you, then please don't be shy in hitting that subscribe button as it helps me out. Thank you and enjoy. So like I said, we've had some interesting updates and news from the developers regarding how we can actually progress through Diablo 4 in terms of our main and alternate characters. I think a lot of Diablo fans have been buzzing with excitement and maybe a little confusion over the skip campaign button that was showcased in a recent video on the character selection screen. If you were a little puzzled, just like me, when first laying eyes upon this curiously clickable little fellow, then have no fear. Luckily, Don Adams, the lead quest designer of Diablo 4, has explained how it works with some useful details. You can read what he says here on the Twitter feed, but he essentially says you have to beat the game just once in whichever class you choose to take to the finish line. I'm very glad this is the case, as I can't think of a single game out there that allowed you to skip the campaign or story on your first playthrough, if at all. However, once you've beaten the story on one character, any character of any class created afterwards will now have the option to skip the campaign. Upon doing this, you will be taken straight to adventure mode and all that the endgame content brings, either from level 1 onwards for fresh rerolls, or whichever level you were currently at when you decided to skip. This, I think, is a very great new feature to include, which really sets itself aside from Diablo 3. If the main campaign is as long as we are all expecting, then not all of us will have the time to beat the game all over again each time we re-roll a new character. And I feel like the devs understand this, and it's their way of respecting our time, while also giving us a vast open world to sink hours into with a rich story, if we so choose to take part in. And remember, this is important, you may want to complete the story up to a certain point if, say, there was a part that you loved and simply wished to replay, or perhaps there was a certain piece of loot that you just had to have for your alternate character. The choice is completely yours, and you can press that enticing skip campaign button at any time in the game on the character selection screen. Now bear in mind, if you do skip the main campaign, all other activities and side quests will still be there for you to take part in, so you can continue to utilise these smaller story elements for levelling up and looting for gear and gold. It's also worth mentioning that as they add new seasonal content and DLCs to the game, players will retain their levels. Nothing gets reset, and these future contents will be separate from the main story and thus not affected by the skip campaign option. Thankfully, it has been confirmed by Don Adams that although there was a sizable chunk of XP gained from the campaign, there will be more than enough XP from side quests, dungeon runs and world events, allowing you to reach max level just fine without taking part in the campaign story. So I think we can safely say that not only have they cleared up any confusion over the skip campaign button, but for all intents and purposes, it sounds like a fantastic feature to have added. Most of us will surely want to try new classes for sure. Well, although there are currently at launch only 5 classes to choose from, we have the Barbarian, Sorceress, Rogue, Necromancer and Druid. Many fans have been wondering if certain classes from Diablo 3 might one day make a return. We have had a vague response on this topic, but it is still an interesting response nonetheless. To me, the reply demonstrates the sheer size and effectiveness of the class skill trees, and it says this: I think you can find some aspects of that in certain ways that our classes play. Like for example, the Rogue has a lot of similarities to what the Demon Hunter did in Diablo 3. There's a lot of arrow-based archer, fantasy and combat, and they move around really quickly across the battlefield. We don't purposely try to hit everything one-to-one, though, because it's hard to make new things, and if all you're doing is referencing old things. But also, if we make something too one-to-one, then that means that we can't bring that class in the future if we wanted to for Diablo 4, right? We don't want to exclude the possibilities of what we could bring in the future by referencing things too much in classes that aren't in Diablo 4 before that maybe existed in previous titles. So essentially we have enough diversity within all skill trees that will allow us to radically adjust how each class can perform using the varied branches available. This way you can make a build that closely resembles the fighting style of previous classes, but is different enough to possibly allow space for one of Diablo 3's heroes to make a return. We had a glimpse of how big and complex the skill trees were in the beta. Although we were capped at 25, you could see how many different branches of the skill tree offer quite opposing playstyles to one another. I mean, it won't be too long before all the sites are flooded with different interpretations of the best builds for each class. This will become a huge deal for endgame content, as many of us will be super curious to check out any improvements for handling Nightmare mode, for instance. I personally will be focusing all my points in just a few skills that I want to use, rather than being a jack of all trades and not using any particular skill to the fullest. Skill points can be implemented in many ways: offensive to defensive fighting styles, attacks and abilities, passive buffs to completely altering your strengths and weaknesses. The fun part of any game like this is when you can go to town on how you want to look, right? Some games have goofy looking character models and others can look great but offer fewer customization options. Well, they've added a ton of diverse customization for all classes that even go to the point of allowing some reflection of yourself and maybe where you come from in the world. The devs have been very open about how important this is to them. However, although many aspects of character creation can be altered to suit you and to look apart from others, such as body type and facial structures, there will be some rigidity to what you cannot do, and it's for good reason. You will not be able to, say, have a super buff and enormous gym bro looking necromancer, or perhaps an anorexic and wasting away skinny barbarian. The lead class designer Adam Jackson explains why. I'd say one thing also on the gameplay side that matters is that it's important for different classes to have different silhouettes so that you can tell what you are playing. If two people come up against each other, like in PvP or out in the world, that you can actually tell, like, hey, there's a barbarian over there, this is a sorceress over here. It's something important that we consider when it comes to even gear and how all those things look on different classes. So you can see why this makes perfect sense and relates heavily to how you can determine what role you have in a fight based on the players around you, whether it's in PvP or out in the world working together against a boss. Diablo 4 has a huge amount of animations and effects happening during battles on the screen, so being able to spot what classes people are is pretty helpful. If you're a returning Diablo player, then you'll be familiar with the Paragon boards, and yes, they have brought them back. And what are Paragon boards? Well, after reaching level 50, you will be earning 4 Paragon points per level, totaling at 200 points to spend. Once you have a build you are happy with in the skill tree, spending points within the Paragon boards will allow us to finally own our build even further. Which path you want to progress on the board is completely up to you and based on how you want to enhance and bolster your skill tree. Planning a journey to certain nodes is crucial, and along the way we can unlock micro adjustments to our stats. More powerful nodes can heavily alter our skills and abilities to even legendary nodes, granting us new powers that can change the way we play altogether. This will no doubt be an important study of trial and error when trying to get the most power from your class as you prepare for those dungeon runs on the hardest difficulties. For anyone wondering how long it would take to reach max level of 100, and this has certainly been a topic of debate on social media, with answers ranging from 80 to 150 hours. Well, that was answered by one of the game directors, Joseph Paipiora, stating that reaching level 100 will take 150 hours plus for the average player experience. Of course, this can be very subjective, as some like to rush and others like to take their time, but still a promising bit of confirmation from the source, I'd say. So when playing in a party with friends, it's worth noting that certain zones will have level floors, meaning that if you are level 10 and enter a zone that has a level floor of 25, then of course the mobs will be at level 25, making for a very tough fight. However, if your friend in the same party is level 40, then they will be facing level 40 mobs. The takeaway here is, aim to keep that level gap as minimal as possible for a more sensible balance when in a particular zone or dungeon. There is the possibility, and I would assume that if your party members are good enough, then perhaps the level 10 player could gain more XP and a level faster than normal, I would surmise. So there is going to be another beta on May the 13th. This is a server slam, so Blizzard will be testing the server stability. And of course there will be another level cap of around 20, but it will give players the chance to earn cosmetics, which will carry on into the main game. But of course their character and levels will be wiped, so everyone starts from scratch, which is fair. Love that. Well, that's it. Thank you so much if you listened all the way through, and I hope you gained something from this video. I will continue to make more updates on Diablo, so please subscribe to get those further notifications, and thank you so much. See you soon. Take care, guys.